All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Investor Frame podcast. I'm your host, Paul Sparks. And on this show, we ask successful real estate investors and entrepreneurs to share their stories so we can all learn from their experiences and get closer to the things that we want in life. Today, I've got a close friend of mine, Devin Robinson here.
Oh, a close friend. I'll take it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's got an awesome shirt, Raise More Capital. He and I are both working on all sorts of different ventures. He and I got to know each other through Collective Genius. I really admire a lot of the things that he does. His family life and like the way he leads his life and all the way bleeding through to people over profits inside of his business. That's his mantra. Absolutely love that. He's going to talk a little bit today about, how he helps people out of really tough foreclosure situations. He just did a presentation at Collective Genius a few weeks back about maximizing your virtual assistants with artificial intelligence, AI, which is a huge topic these days. Yep. He's doing all sorts of stuff with land entitlements, which I'm very jealous of as well. So it's awesome to have you, man. Welcome in, Devin.
Oh man, so thankful to be here. I appreciate you and you even considering having me on. The feeling is so mutual, man. I'm always impressed and I'm always bragging about you. People are like, I go to this mastermind. And when I talk about like one of the things that I believe, and this may be just diving in or whatever, but one of the big things that I believe about the community that CG has and even like the other masterminds that I'm in is like every time I'm around people at CG, the ceiling of what I believe is possible is raised. But then also like the floor of the floor of my limiting beliefs are also raised. And I always brag about like, I remember this like very, very vividly, like us sitting in a circle and it was like you who has this crypto fund. There's this guy, Muhammad, who is like, oh, I'm going to be worth $20 billion in 10 years. And then this other guy who's like, I am starting essentially like Carfax for real estate. And it was just like, these are the people that I surround myself with. It's insane. And like, you're one of those examples of the guys that I'm like, I don't belong in that circle with this guy, but it's really cool to be in there with him. So I'm really thankful for just your friendship, man, and the time we get together.
Yeah, same here. Well, I would say that belt that you've got there in the screen, if you're listening to this, Devin's got a sweet Collective Genius belt. And I believe you won like the last couple times. It was like third place, second place, and then first place. So
yep, that's exactly right.
That's awesome. Well, we always start this show off with a 6-word update. So why don't you give us your 6-word update for today?
Yeah. Okay. So my 6-word update is like what I'm spending a lot of my time doing right now. And it's just like maximize VA potential with artificial intelligence. Like that's my 6-word update because like I'm constantly in this process of like, VAs are awesome. VAs are just like wildly slept on. Not the services that they provide, but the opportunities that they have, like that they give to expand and to enhance what we do. And so like we tend to put VAs in a box where like my VAs to like legitimately have like master's degrees, like all of them, and it's like they've got master's degrees. They're highly intelligent. We just tend to go, VAs are good for administrative assistance and cold calling and texting, where like what I decided to do was be like, guys, what are you guys passionate about? Like, what do you love doing? Even like, so I'm on like my 9th business right now. And so I have learned and grown in a lot of different industries. And so in that, I'm also very, very big on like self-education. So I probably have like 40 courses like that I've bought. Well over $100,000 worth of courses. And I was like, guys, here's a list of all the courses I have. Pick one. I don't care. Just pick one. Because I wanted them to do something because like VAs, they do the mundane because like they can. And we don't have any Filipino VAs, but like the average salary of a nurse in the Philippines is like $200 or $300 a month. And these cold callers are making like $700 a month. So they're not doing it because they love it. They're doing it because it's the best paying thing that they could do. And so I was like, guys, like, I want you guys to do something you love. And so they just started picking stuff from my courses from like, from like content creation and editing to SEO to branding, like Donald Miller's story brand, to like, you name it. Like they started choosing it. And so then what birthed out of that was like, holy smokes, you guys are crushing all of this stuff. And then they started doing all that for me. So people are always like, yo, Devin, who's creating your content? Who's doing that and that and that? Are you doing all that? And I'm like, I haven't touched it. I don't even look at it. Like, They do it. They post it. Like all of the stuff is done from them. And so, but just because I gave them the opportunity to kind of do something that they love to do, and they are on fire for it. And so then what ended up happening was we were like, yo, they know 100 other people that would love to do what they're doing. Let's start this VA service. And so that ended up happening from there. And so like I'm constantly, what's wild though for me is like the rate in which artificial intelligence is growing is like astronomical. So historically, like for the last 5 years, our technology has grown at like a 200-year rate each year, if that makes sense. So like every year we advance in technology by 200 years. So essentially, like if you think about it, it took so long to have a combustible engine or whatever it's called, and to advance to the next thing, that like we're doing that at such a fast rate. We were doing that at such a fast rate before, but it's now like astronomically faster because AI, where I'll have something and I'm like, guys, check out this AI. This is a really cool one. And I essentially told them all, I go, hey, in the next week, come up with 4 AI applications each that replaces you in what you do. And like, not for the sake of them being replaced, but because like, I want you to enhance everything you do with it. Because for instance, if we offer a VA service, instead of one person handling only 10 clients, we can now leverage VAs for one person to handle 50 clients, and so then that enhances the efficiency of what they do through AI. But because artificial intelligence learns from itself at this point, every time, like I'm like, hey, this is a really awesome service, and it's probably the best one at the time, and then a week later, there's another one. Like there's literally another one that's slightly better than that one because it used the other one as a framework. And so like, it's like it's a huge thing, which like there's so much that grows from it. But I've got a spreadsheet of like 60, maybe like I would say like 45 different AI sites that like we can implement to enhance what they're doing, and it's insane.
That's
it's
cool.
Absolutely insane. So that's that's my 6 words.
Well, so we talk also about this idea of the solvable problem.
Yeah.
Right. And we get into business because, I mean, we all have our reasons. You, like me, we're both competitive guys. Like I like to compete. I like to play business as a sport. It's because it's really fun and exciting, and you get to impact people's lives, and you get to make money and all these fun things. It's got these highs and these lows. Right. And so I'm curious, how do you think about your own solvable problem? What are you using these businesses to help you get closer to in life?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And I appreciate you laying it out like that. So, and here's the honesty of that. Like, you sent me the email that had the solvable problem thing. I didn't quite understand it. And then you told me your solvable problem, which is to play business like you play pick up ball. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Just to hear you say that. And so like in the last 10 minutes, I've got a very unrefined solvable problem, but I do think it fits the core values of who I am and at the core, and even like what my long-term vision is. And so at the same time, when I talked about like the ceiling of what I believed is possible, I can achieve, that expanded my long-term goal of what I want out of my life. So like I don't know if you've listened to Rob Dyrdek lately, but I'm like obsessed with Rob Dyrdek. Like
that guy is very, very disciplined and
hyper optimized. His life is like hyper optimized. It reminds me of Kobe, like very, very much the same way, a hyper optimized life, but his is a lot more analytical. And so I love that. And so I actually try to do that, but he talks about this idea of 100-year goal, and that like, that's really, really fascinating to me, because like when I think of my 100-year goal, I think of what do I want the legacy that I live my life for to be in 100 years when I'm long gone. I don't want to live 100 years, 100 more years. I definitely don't. And so like, what do I want the legacy to be? And then at the same time, this ends up being remind me of what it's called?
Solvable problem.
Yeah. What my solvable problem is. And so for me, it aligns with my 100-year goal. But with that solvable problem is to be able to impact the most amount of people without impacting my family's life. So like, and when I say that, it's still unrefined, but like I have tried so hard to help so many people. I really my heart and my desire is that people don't think that people over profit for me is like a facade or some sort of gimmick. I really, really want people. I actually I don't care at this point like what people think about it, but I hope that I don't put off like that it's a facade. I really want people over profit to be like what I do, what I live for, and not just a saying of what we stand for. And so in this process, my wife has to remind me multiple times, hey Devin, your job isn't to take care of that person. Your job is to take care of our family, because I often will sacrifice, and this is a tension that I have to walk the line of. Like I often will sacrifice sometimes like what my family gets and what my family has to be able to help and serve other people. And so one of my things, I'm something solvable problems. So is to be able to like help the maximum amount of people that I possibly can without hindering the well-being and the quality of life of my family. You know what I'm saying? And so like to be able to give as freely as I possibly can at such a high level and at such a high scale that it still doesn't sacrifice the well-being and the quality of life of my family is what I would say is mine. And hopefully that falls into line of what it actually is supposed to be and what you're talking about.
Dude, I think it's great to hear your perspective on that. So it's like, well, if you're trying to build a life, ideally that gets you closer to the things that you want, the goal is really to align with what we say the least amount of risk, least amount of effort, and most amount of options, right? And so this barbell strategy, what this does is it basically says we don't want to load weight in the middle of the bar. There's a lot of risk to the barbell tipping over. Like that just doesn't make sense. We wouldn't load weight in the middle of the bar.
Yeah.
And so on one side, we want to have things that are very reliable, that are allowing us to achieve this financial certainty and go do whatever it is that we're trying to do in life. On the other side, the authors who write about this, they describe like we want to take bets that have a really high upside, but also have a very low downside. So I'm curious if you could describe your different strategies and maybe where you've got things on one side or the other, and maybe where you've got things in the middle where, yeah, the upside's big, but the downside's also fairly big because it's not super reliable at the moment.
Yeah. So great, man. It is one of those things where like, okay, so the land stuff, huge upside. Risk isn't actually that bad. Like, because I'm trying to think of risk reward, the upside, all of that stuff like that, kind of that ratio. But it's hard because I have an extremely high, like off the charts risk tolerance. So nothing seems risky to me. Like when you're talking about risk, I'm like, none of it's risky, but I mean like maybe, because like, maybe it's risky to dive all in and abandon all other marketing avenues in order to pursue foreclosures. Like maybe, because then what if you don't get any that week or whatever? Maybe it's risky to start a fund. And so like, maybe it's risky to start a VA thing because people are like, oh, the market's saturated full of them. Maybe. And so, I don't know, man, like my risk tolerance is like so off the walls that I just don't think in like, man, this is a really risky thing for me to do. I just think like, here's an opportunity. Why wouldn't I pursue it? I'm on like my 9th business at this point. Like, I feel like I've learned, and you mentioned this earlier. It's very, very right. In that like, I've owned other businesses and they're like 101, like building and running those businesses is like 101. This is like a 301. Like you got to have SOPs, different departments communicate well with each other, all of that stuff. The only risky side of it is like not having the things set up to efficiently run, because what ends up happening is like most businesses, when people start them, and most opportunities, when people start them, they don't die from starvation. They typically work. They die from, like most businesses die from indigestion because like they don't have the infrastructure to support the growth. They don't have the systems and processes in place to sustain growth and progress. And so for me, like it's hard for me to think of the barbell thing as like a risk thing. And so I do have a little bit of trouble wrapping my head around it. And so if I'm honest with you, and so that may not be the right answer to the question, but it's hard. Like, I just don't necessarily see a huge risk to anything that I'm doing. I feel like wholeheartedly that it's work, that it'll work, as long as we have the systems and processes in place for it to grow well.
Well,
That may not
let
be
me
what you're.
articulate this in a way that might, because it took me a while to click. Because you and I are very similar. Like my risk tolerance is very high. Let's just
Yeah.
say, you know.
Yeah,
And someone told me this story, and maybe it'll click for you. So it was like, let's play a game. You want to play a game?
I love
So
games. Let's play them.
so it costs $10 to play this game, and you get 6 tries to win.
Okay.
If you win, you make $1 million. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, $10.
$10, you get to play 6 times. You know,
$1 million.
you win, you make $1 million. And actually, you have an 83% chance of winning this game every single time you play. What do you think? You want to play?
I'm all in.
Okay. That is what most entrepreneurs do. But here's the game. It's called Russian roulette. So Russian roulette, what do we know about Russian roulette? There's 6 spots in the chamber and there's 1 bullet in there.
It's
so
very permanent.
83% of the time, 5 times out of 6, you're not going to catch that bullet and you're going to win $1 million. But 1 time out of 6, 17% of the time, the game is complete total ruin and now you can never play again.
Yep.
And so why that stuck with me so bad is that as entrepreneurs, most of the time we just look at, but look at the upside here. Yeah, but if I'm right, I make $1 million and I have an 83% chance of making it. But none of us would play that game if we actually knew we were playing Russian roulette, because we're not paying attention to the downside. And so I'm not insinuating that business is life or death, that if we're wrong, we, blow our head off and we can never play again. But what I learned from that story right there is that I have a tendency to not look at the downside, to only look at the upside.
Yeah, same.
And so when I started rewiring my brain to say, like, well, if we can just remove the downside from these situations, all we're left with is upside. Yeah. So when I talk about risk, what I'm saying is, how do we take things and put it like businesses that we run and make them very reliable, right? The wholesaling side of our businesses, different things that we all do, rentals, things like this. The downside is very low with these types of businesses. Ideally, if they're very, very predictable, right? You put one thing in, you get this out. So it's a highly predictable business and the downside is very low because of that. Where we get into trouble is where we make bets where, like, if this goes right, we make $1 million.
Yeah.
If this goes wrong, we blow our life up and we can't play anymore.
Yep.
But we don't pay attention to the downside. We only look at the upside as, quick starts and people who are high, tolerance for risk and things like this. And so that's how I think about risk, is like saying, well, I get that the upside's really big with that game, but what's the actual downside? So I'm trying to rewire my brain to say, well, how do I make bets that if we're wrong, the downside is very low, but if we're right, we're either going to get high, reliable, predictable businesses, or we're going to have massive upside. And I tend to agree with you. Things like land entitlements, what's the downside? Well, we're not actually taking title to the property. You might be out a few tens of thousands of dollars that you're going to spend on, surveys and environmental things, yada,
architects,
yada,
stuff like that. Yeah.
Very low downside, but huge upside.
Yep.
The podcasting and the stuff that you do. And I can speak from my own experiences. The upside is massive. Like the things that have people have popped out of the woodworks, the opportunities that have found me. I mean, I would have never been able to predict that. It's very unpredictable, but the upside is tremendous. What's the downside of making that decision to go to a personal branding strategy? I don't know. You make friends.
Yeah. Like you make content. I don't know. Maybe time. Time is the only.
That's it. In my opinion, the downside is your time, a little bit of money, like the opportunity cost potentially. But, so That's how I think of the barbell is like,
Okay.
well, what's the downside of doing this? If I'm wrong, what happens? If this doesn't work out, what happens? And I try to now reorient my brain to say, how do we make bets that if I'm wrong here, we're going to be just fine? Because if you can just eliminate downside, all you're left with is upside. And that's how I think about risk.
That's good. No, I appreciate that. That's really good too, man.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about certainty and what we do inside the Whale Club, you can find the link below in the show notes to join our free community on Discord.